Power 102 Digital.
This is a hard talk for 102 Digital Monday. And of course, on the set with me, as usual, on a Monday is our host, Karen Nunez Tesheira. Nice animation there.
Okay, and first and foremost, all
Yes.
the season's greetings. And for those who believe in Christ, don't believe in Christ, have their own religious beliefs, all of us are mere mortals, and none of us have died and come back. Although some of us say we have, but I don't think I've ever met anyone who I believe went and came back. So, based on that, we all don't know what is going to happen when we cross over to the other side. So, we try to live a good life. And this is a season that we have to recognize for many Christians because it is a Christian celebration as we celebrate other religious festivals in our country, which makes us such an outstanding and such a country to be admired in many ways, in the way that we celebrate other religions and in as national festivals. We also must celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ for those of us who believe in Jesus Christ and our many variations of Christianity. And please do not leave God out of your thoughts in whatever way you believe Him and see Him to be. I am not a preacher, I'm not a priest, I'm not any of those things. But just want to say the season's greetings and God, however you see Him to be or not, God's blessings to you and your family. So, first, I want to say to the listeners from all over the world, that I truly, truly appreciate how you've stayed with me and stayed with David McIntyre, who has been my anchor behind the scenes. Poor David, he has to hear a call from me the next day. He got away this time, I think. Because I'm laughing, but I'm really not laughing because what happened is my dearest friend ever since I was age of 19 years of age, an American, went to McGonagall Evers College, and she passed away less than 48 hours ago. I am going up to see her. I had gone to see her, so I did get to see her before she passed, about 2 weeks ago. So not such a happy time for me, but it's, if you believe there's a God and there's another world, well then, celebrate her life. I celebrate it because I didn't mean to speak about her today, but I must mention her, not only because she was my dearest friend, but she's an example to us all. She was blind. She got blind. She was not blind all her life. She became blind 15 years ago. That did not stop her. That did not stop her from getting a PhD from the same university as Portia Simpson. That did not stop her from starting one of the most powerful agencies in New York, funded by the city for underprivileged students at all levels, called Urban Strategies. She is the founder of that institution. She gave her entire life to the people of her country, and I am proud to call her my friend. And so, goodbye, Glenda. I didn't mean to mention you today, but I think she's an inspiration to all of us. And this season of giving, she certainly exemplified all that we would like to think that God represented. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, she met Whitney Houston's mother, spoke to her for a whole year and a half when she was doing her thesis. She spoke to Joe, Michael Jackson's father, for a long period of time when she's writing a thesis. So she was no little, she may not have been a big player in the world of whatever we call it, simple person, but a person of, I didn't mean to mention it today, but God, it was meant to happen. So, Glenda Taylor, my beloved friend, God speed to you. And on that note, we turn to the season of Christmas. All our listeners, I want to say I am happy to have you. Without you, there's no me, there's no show, there's no reason for being here. And I hope that whatever I do or whatever we do on this show with our hosts or co-hosts, whoever comes and joins us on the show, that in some way it helps, at some level, because that is the intention. And I certainly couldn't do it without David McIntyre. I just call him. He knows that, What David? Every day, every other day, I call him. And we are supposed to be joined. I'm not seeing him on his yet.
I just chat with him. He said he's now setting up the link.
Right. So we're going to be joined by a guest. So we always try. Um, to bring persons who we think will elevate all of us get instructive, all of us learn something. And hopefully at the end of the day, it makes Trinidad and Tobago a more, even a greater country than it already is. Everybody thinks their country is the best. We think ours is the best. No, nothing wrong with that. Okay? And when you see me dancing, that's because that's in my DNA. I'm sorry. And I tell people, if they ever ask me why I like to dance, I say, I'm not from Begonia, so I'm not supposed to dance. Okay. So I love to dance. Yes, I love to dance. I
Nice.
love music. I love to dance. And this is Jesus' time. And this is a time of joy
And
and
celebration.
happiness and
Yes.
celebration. And
Yes.
even if it was, I'd still be dancing.
Yeah.
I'd still be dancing. So I'm waiting on Dr. Justin Ram. That is our guest. So maybe let me just do a little before he comes on, so we could go straight on to giving him all the hard questions. Really, things that I think we would all learn from. I said, I'm going to learn, and I hope it will be that type of experience for all of us at the end of the day. He is no stranger to anyone. He's been on many other programs. I think he's been on this program once before, as well as written number of articles. But apart from that, he is the director of economics for the Caribbean Development Bank, and he specializes in energy and energy-related projects. He has worked with senior global economists as a senior global economist with Wally Parsons. I didn't know who Wally Parsons was. Like, forgive me, I did look it up, but they're big in the dance, as we like to say in Trinidad. And
Yes.
they do a lot of consultancy work, especially in the energy sector. So he's also an economist. He's an economist by profession, but he has worked for the United States Government Department for Transport as a supervisory economist with the Greater London Authority. He is and continues to be a consultant in oil and gas related and oil related projects in Central Asia, Africa, and has worked with the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and International Labour Organization. So a person with all of those with all of that experience and position, is highly qualified, as he is. He has his PhD, Dr. Ram, and from London School of Economics and Political Science. And that is some of the top people, okay, I'll call some like John Kennedy, or many, many American presidents, and many persons who we hold in high regard have passed through LSE in London, in England. So he has his PhD from LSE, London School of Economics and Political Science, his master's from University of College London, his Bachelor of Science, University of the West Indies, has a postgraduate certificate in economic management. I hope I'm pronouncing it correct. In sustainable economic management from the University of California, Berkeley. We all know of University of California, Berkeley. So we know that we have as our co-host this afternoon someone who we always try to bring persons who bring value. Not to say that others can't, but we know that we want to be able to reach out to persons, what they call SMEs, subject matter experts, who can really throw light on topics that sometimes we ourselves become confused about, and you get different variations, and sometimes you're not quite sure what to make of the information that you're given. So it's always good to have people like Dr. Ram. We had Dr. Roger Hussain, Professor Dr. Roger Hussain last week, and here he is, Dr. Justin Ram, joining us. Hello, how are you?
Hello, hi, Karen. Very well, thank you. How are you
You are
doing?
there, I see.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I call my COVID bed.
That's your COVID bed. Oh,
Yes,
dear me. All right. As long as the people who have to deal with COVID bed are happy with it, then we don't have any complaints.
yeah,
But I know
exactly.
you're Trinidadian, but you heard my introduction of you, although you worked with us at the time. So I did do an introduction of who you were and your background, your PhD from London School of Economics and Political Science. And
Okay.
though we know that is a top player in the world of academia, some of the top presidents of the United States have attended there. So that's just to give you an indication. and we went through your master's, and you really specialize in oil and energy sector projects, worked with the IMF, United Nations, ILO, and you are currently, I hope I don't get this wrong because I had to be corrected last week about information I gave about another guest. You are the Director of Economics for the Caribbean Development Bank. Is that
Well,
correct?
I know I need to correct you on that one. I
But that's
was.
what's on the, that is what is on the
Oh,
on
that's an
the,
old.
yeah,
Okay,
I
yeah.
pull it up from the website. So correct.
Right. Yeah, no, that was I left the Caribbean Development Bank back in 2020,
Ooh,
and
okay.
I'm now well, lead advisor to the government of Turks and Caicos Islands on implementation, but then I also have my own consultancy that I run. So yeah, so I've gone from the sort of quasi public sector into private fully.
Right.
Yes.
And I know that would have come, I mean, me, myself being, having come from, yes, I did come from an academic background. Yes, people, I did. And is part of that is doing consultancy work. And you can only get consultancy work with the top companies if they believe that they're getting value for their money, because they're not into charity. I mean, if they're doing charity work, there's a place for that in their organization. So when they bring you in as a consultant, it's because you have proven yourself worthy of doing that type of work. And if Turks and Caicos has brought you in, it's because they recognize the value you bring to Turks and Caicos and helping them navigate their economy. And from your experience, and a very well, as the director of economics at the Caribbean Development Bank, so I'm sure they are happy to have you on. I'm sure all the other consultants who have the benefit of your immense knowledge. So that was the sort of introduction I had given in your absence. But we had sort of spoken, and again, we say welcome to you, Dr. Ram, and of course, to our listeners. I got pulled up 2 weeks ago for saying, she didn't say salutations to us.
Oh,
And one of the things I do, I tell people, you must take correction. You must take
yeah.
correction. If people give you a correction, take a correction.
No
I
correction.
mean, take a
Exactly.
correction. I'll be big. Take a
Yeah.
correction. So I take my
Yeah.
correction. And I take my correction, and I will make every effort that does not ever, ever happen again.
Right.
And I'm going to rely on David McIntyre to help us with that. But before we go into the topics that we would like to discuss, and for me, for having an understanding, even, I should say even me, but I mean, I think it's going to be helpful to the listening audience. We would have liked to have been able to put the numbers up on the screen, because when you put it up, it makes it easier for people to communicate. But I know that with David, so he'll tell us the numbers, but I also know that people will send him text messages. So at any time, David, I've told you that before. Please feel free to interrupt me. I'm sure Dr. Ram will not take offense to it, because what are we here for? But to help people to understand, to navigate themselves in this new world that we're living in.
Yes.
So you can give us the numbers and all
Okay.
for the Christmas season, David.
Well, season's greetings to all the folks who are locked on to Power Monitor Digital Monday Hard Talk. The numbers that you can connect with us are 222-8255, 222-8255, 612-8255, 612-8255. Our toll-free number, 866-525-1099. Toll-free, 866-525-1099. And you can WhatsApp your messages to 318-1021. 318-1021, where you can WhatsApp your messages.
And we really will appreciate it, because you may not, I remember when I was in school, I used to tell you, no question is a bad question. And then you used to say to yourself, I'm sure about that one. But
Yeah.
I ain't too sure. That's true. But in our case, it's true, because when you ask a question, it forces us, it compels us to think outside the box and say, something, maybe I wasn't so clear, or maybe I really don't come across, or maybe I need to give it more thought. You wouldn't believe how much I learned, and I'm sure Dr. Ram has learned, just from someone saying, the man in the street asking him something, and he say, I have to really think about that more,
Yeah, no, that's so critical, because when you're in the weeds and you're doing your work, there are some things that you don't think about, that you need to have just conversations with the ordinary person for you to really get a clearer picture. And especially when you're doing policy analysis and policy making, you really want to have a broad suite of knowledge to allow you to then make recommendations that are workable, right? So that's really important.
That's very important, because I think sometimes before I go into some of the things that we could discuss, and I said you're a co-host, so some of the things maybe I'm going to give a little point of view on them, because it has to have a little bit of a legal twisted, so it might not be exactly totally up your alley, right? But the thing about it is that when people ask you questions, we are here for you. That's why we're here. We're not here for ourselves. I mean, I could sit in my room and read, and Dr. Ram could write all his consultancy papers and do his consultancy work and so on. But when governments call you in, and when they ask you to do consultancies, they're doing it because they're trying to get the best, and they're trying to get the best to make things better for the people. As hard as you may think it is to understand that concept, it really is true. It is the case. I know that, having been in government myself, I can't see left, right, and anyway, yes. You're in government, and people may think you are so far removed. I can't speak for everyone, but I do feel that for most, or from a large percentage of persons who are in a government position, when they bring in a consultant, is because it's something that they need a subject matter expert to give them guidance, and then to see if it is implementable, because they alone will know if it is implementable. All you can do is give them the best advice, given the information they give you, your knowledge and expertise at the end of the day, but you've given them that from which they can make policy decisions and implement those decisions. But that is the purpose of doing that, not just collecting a set of documents on a shelf. People say that about government. But anyhow, we didn't get really a chance, and I had asked you, and maybe you would like to say many topics that I had in mind, but I'm going to let you lead off on any topic that you want to. Of course, one of them, because of your knowledge and based in the energy sector, I was really going to drill you down maybe on the future of energy for Trinidad and Tobago, because we're talking about Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Trinidad and Tobago, in face of all the failed efforts, the gas to liquid, all these projects, TTPHL, you got all these things, the amount of natural gas. I want you to speak to us really about that. And before you do speak, that's one. And the other one, I would, you will also please help us with the topics, the issue of devaluation, which is constantly on the, being a matter of discussion. They say, money is overvalued. And, sometimes I ask myself, but why is the U.S., Barbados, 3-1? Why their money is 2-1 to the U.S. dollars? When they went into, I had just picked it up by chance, a huge debt crisis there of 7.5 billion when they went in default on a bond.
Yes.
Right? And then you want to know how Eastern Caribbean, how their money could be more than ours, So that thing on devaluation, I would love to have your explanation on that. And the other thing, which is your productivity and employment. Let's get down into the nuts and bolts on it. And when we do speak about it, if you are prepared to talk about that, I am going to mention the current issue with the president of the Industrial Court and how the matter was handled. And I'm going to talk about it strictly from a legal perspective, because, things go on behind the door, and you don't, well, having been there already, you really don't know everything. But I'm going to start with this quotation, and it was from in March 27, 2022, and that is dealing with the energy for which you are well versed in that area. And this is a quotation from March 27th, 2022, from the Vice President, Dr. Barrett Jackday of Guyana. And he said that Trinidad and Tobago's oil-dependent economy is falling apart. And that Guyana will not follow in Trinidad and Tobago's footsteps he's talking about the need, he's talking about it in relation to the need to diversify and the disease, the touch disease. And he said Guyana economy must invest the oil and gas resources and do not do like some countries in the world. Look what is happening to Trinidad and Tobago now. So,
Right.
yes. So I don't know if you want to start with the energy sector and the future and how you see it for Trinidad.
Sure. Well, but let me just respond to that quotation there. I do believe that that's somewhat of an unfair, I guess, description of what Trinidad and Tobago did with its oil and gas rents. I mean, yes, we could have saved a bit more, but I think generally past governments did try to convert some of those revenues into as what we as economists like to call other types of capital. So if I just explain to the audience members that there are really about four types of capital upon which economies are built on. The first and the most basic is what you call your natural capital, of which oil and gas are part of. And then you have human capital, which I think inevitably, if you really want to have an advanced economy, you have to have strong human capital, which means that people have good education at tertiary level, but even beyond in terms of postgraduate qualifications, and of course, good healthcare, right? And then you have man-made capital, which is really your strong infrastructure, which helps people and firms become more productive. And then finally, and well, within man-made, I would also sort of include financial capital there. But then finally, you have to have strong social capital, which is this overall trust that people have. And if I look at our economy, Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of those four capitals, what we have tried to do is to convert revenues from our natural capital and invest that into other forms of capital. Mainly, there was a big push, I would say, in the early 2000s to educate the population. So a lot more people went to university, which I actually will always say that could never be a bad thing. So we try to develop our human capital. We try to build a lot of infrastructure. We still have some ways to go. We did build up some financial buffers as it relates to the HSF. We probably could have saved more. But then where we are really, really falling down on, and where we have not put enough investment in, is really our social capital. And we see that fall out with antisocial behavior, namely crime. Yes. And so when you look at it, we have a lot of distrust. People will say, well, I'm not going out at night because I'm not trusting my fellow human beings within the country. And so I would say, based on that quotation coming out of the VP of Guyana, there's some truth, but at the same time, we as a country did try to invest in some areas, but we know that we still have a bit more to do. So I would just say that there. Of course, there is a lot more to do because we have now got to a point where we have stagnated. Now, let me say a little something about the oil and gas and the energy industry in general terms. Look, I always try to remind persons that before Trinidad and Tobago went into liquefied natural gas, Karen, we had reserves to production ratio. So that is when we were just using our gas to generate electricity, or for the urea plants, methanol example. We had enough gas to last us about 70 years, right? 70 years. So that, let's say around the turn of the century, we had enough gas to last us until about 2070 or so. The moment we went into LNG, we actually reduced our reserves to production ratio, maybe down to about 2025, 2030. That is based on the data that we had then. Now, the thinking was that we would monetize our gas upfront, and in so doing, we would have more economic growth earlier on, upon which we should have built a much better foundation. We tried to do it, like I said, investing in human capital. But as we can see now, the oil and gas, the gas in particular, is now running low. And so that's why we had to now mothball the first train of the LNG, and why we're also struggling to provide gas to some of the other plants in Point Lisas. But I would say that if we were really serious about it, and this is a bit of a controversial statement, I would shut down another LNG train right now, right? Because one of the things that LNG does is that it uses a lot of your gas up front, but the real value added for your economy is not as high. And I would then push that the remaining gas into higher value added activities at home in Trinidad and Tobago, upon which you now want to build a more dynamic economy. I know that that is a bit of a controversial statement, because in the absence of getting this dragon field going, and I really don't think it is a great economic strategy to be putting your fortunes in the hands of the president of Venezuela at the moment. you know, I think we have to look at the gas that we have now and see how we can utilize that gas in more higher valued activities at home in Trinidad and Tobago. And so if I was a brave leader who was in charge now, looking at what we have, I would shut down an LNG plant right now and channel that remaining gas into other activities that generate a lot more jobs and economic activity at home. Now,
I have so much to respond to what you said there, but I'm going to let you go. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
yes,
Go ahead.
but
Oh,
so now, of course, I think the country has to now begin to look at how we develop other sectors of the economy. And that, of course, we all know for many decades we've been speaking about diversification. And I think one of the disappointing things that I have not seen from any government recently is this lack of focus on diversification. There are some green shoots. Recently I saw news that in Trinidad and Tobago we started to produce suitcases, for example, but nothing big came out of that. I don't know what are the economic impacts of that, but at least that is something that looks a little bit different. But Trinidad and Tobago actually has a lot of other things that it can start focusing on. Why are we not building out our tourism industry? Why are we not building out Piarco, for example? We already have a national airline that we're not using sufficiently. Why are we not building out Piarco and environs to be more of a hub, so that we get more economic activity through Trinidad and Tobago in that regard? And then overall, our overall tourism product has not been developed sufficiently. And of course, we have so many more opportunities to drill further down for greater value added in our manufacturing, in agriculture as well. But a lot of this, Karen, will not happen, I think, unless we take a deep breath and look and see what is the role of government now. Government really has to step back and start facilitating in a much bigger way, so that we have greater private sector led growth in the economy. And I think that's how we are eventually going to diversify. Now, there are a lot of other things that have to go into this, which I guess we can discuss during the course of this program. Some of these other topics, evaluation and currency, are really important areas that we have to discuss as well. But how we improve productivity, increase the labor market participation. And one of the big topics I want to discuss with you today as well, Karen, is tax reform, and how we use fiscal incentives to promote growth, and the type of tax reforms that I think we need now, in order to promote the type of growth, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but I think in the rest of the Caribbean. I think the time for us to have deep discussions about where we tax, what we incentivize, it is time for us to talk about that and to have those meaningful changes.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, you know that Dr. Ram, I have to say, you're a diplomat. That's what I'm going to say. I am going to say you're a diplomat,
Uh,
because so much of the data, not my data, economic, the from central bank and the CSO, IMF, all the different data points, and also the Reuters and Bloomberg and you name them, we could call them. So much of what you said, I do agree with you that Dr. Jagdew should not have said what he said, but I think there was a lot of ill will between Trinidad and Guyana at the time. I don't know if you would recall, but I think there was this whole thing with the COVID where I think it were two things that I've said before on the show. So I don't know if, that ill will sort of thing may have been incentive because it certainly doesn't help CARICOM, right? And we are trying to, right now, and you could tell us how important CARICOM has become both in the energy and agro industry, especially with Ghana and Suriname having the land space and the ability to really be a player to provide the raw product as we did for England and Europe for years, and for there to be some joint projects. But I think it had a lot to do with the statement of our Prime Minister, which I've said before about, with the COVID. And he said, yeah, we have 165,000. Yeah, they have, but they're not approved. We could say that. And they took great offense to it, by the way. Yeah, they got the advisors of the Minister of Health to come and respond to that. And I think when they had their first energy conference, our Prime Minister didn't attend. I think he went somewhere else. First one. Right. So it wasn't sending the right message. And I think there's a lot of that may have informed the views a year ago. But reality is you're being very, very kind because this thing about first of all, the LNG, nobody has, as I say a lot of times, a crystal ball. You are an economist. And one thing I learned when I did my MBA, and I learned that the economists are always trying to balance. They're always trying to create balance in an economy. So they're always working between monetary policy and the government fiscal policy to create balance. So we don't have a balanced economy. So we need, a surplus is okay, but you definitely don't want the deficit. So, and it's a non-stop activity involving a number of initiatives. Okay, so I say that in the context of how kind you're being, because our Prime Minister, I've said it on the show already, and no one is contradicting me, I've got it from the newspapers. Since 2019, September 2019, he said we had 2.8 billion cubic feet of gas per day. And he said that we were in dire circumstances if we did not get some investments because we needed a minimum 4.1 billion cubic feet for the downstream and for the LNG. I heard the point you made about the LNG, but I think it's a little too late. First of all, the trains, and it's really 3 trains because train 1 has no gas in it, or no gas that BP or Shell is willing to put any money in. So they have unitized it and made one commercial entity, and given through the NGC, given the government a larger share of the 3 trains that have been pulled together. But the major players, China's come out, the major players are Shell and BPTT. And I cannot see Shell or BPTT and their shareholders agreeing to what you're saying. Because when I can say that when I was in government, Trinidad and Tobago was the largest supplier of LNG to the United States. United States did not have the LNG. So economies are not static, they're dynamic. And at that time, LNG, in 2008, we had a surplus over 11-point-something% surplus in 2008. And then came the global financial crisis. But LNG still continues to be a big player, especially with the UK and Russia war, where that pipeline, for whatever reason, everybody going LNG to get their natural gas. And natural gas is the cleanest of the fossil fuels. So I'm not too sure that is a feasible thing to tell Shell or BPTT, who they've asked now, especially when you're talking about changing tax reform, which I think Ghana did do with ExxonMobil. They did change the way in which the supplemental petroleum tax, the way in which the various taxes that were payable, they changed the formula because it was seen in ExxonMobil, the view was that they were being taken advantage of. And so they have done some reform on their end. They could do that because you know what their growth rate is 400 and something, 100% growth. It's way out the window. I had Professor Roger Hussain on last week or the week before, and I had the figures in front of me for the Caribbean countries. Out of all the Caribbean countries between 2050 to 2022, and somebody told me, why didn't I mention Q1 2020? But I should have mentioned 2023 because Professor Roger Hussain mentioned 2023 that IMF predicted is going to be even worse. 3 countries with negative growth. Haiti, you're not surprised, negative 4.1%. Suriname, negative 34. In other words, their economy is contracted by that amount since 2050. Forget about year on year or year on year. What has happened to the economy since 2015? And Trinidad, 17.5%. And IMF, according to Professor Hussain, I'm not misstating what he said, Trinidad is projected to even contract even further to 20% from 2015. Our economy is simply not growing. It is not growing. And when you say the natural gas, why did you, in 2019, our Prime Minister made that statement and talking about, one good thing I have to say, which you didn't mention, and which is a good thing for us, Touchstone has discovered, as you know, 381 billion cubic feet of natural gas on land. So when they start production, they can provide 200 to 300 million cubic feet per day. So that is good news for us.
Yes.
I don't know if Dragonfield is going to ever come to be, but if it does, the trillions of cubic feet of gas they could only pump by the gas pipeline, 200 to 300 million cubic feet. And you know what you say about Maduro, right? Maduro telling them no. I have to laugh. Maduro saying, you know, I have one gas pipeline going to Guiria. I may not pronounce it correctly. Forgive the pronunciation.
Right.
But that's domestic needs. But you know what? Build the next one right there now and bring the gas on into Venezuela. And when you bring it in Venezuela, guess what we will do? We'll send some down to the LNG Point Forte and we'll send the rest down to the Point Lisas Industrial Estate. Nobody taking after that, right? So we have that. We have the Lauren. We have the Manatee. We have the solar project. And you have to also be, in all fairness too, part of the reason why so much of the natural gas has been utilized as it has is because our law says that the first user of natural gas for electricity is for domestic purposes. So that has to be fulfilled before you go giving anybody else, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say, with a growth that is contracted, 3 out of all the countries, I think, with a debt to GDP that is 71%, only because the 5 mangoes that we were selling in 2020, instead of getting $5 for it, we got $500. In fact, we weren't even selling 5 mangoes. We were selling 4 mangoes in 2021. So we didn't even grow the economy. Nothing to do with us. So they didn't grow the economy. They did not, the debt to GDP ratio is not as bad as they expected because we got much more money than we expected. And nothing to do with what the minister did or what the government did. Let us be real. And after the foreign exchange reserves, if you don't have foreign exchange, who's taking your money? This is why we want to talk about evaluation too. Who's taking your money? I had the figures in just the other day, 20, I don't want to get the figure wrong, but I believe I may not be wrong to say 2014, we had 10.6 billion for US dollars in foreign exchange. Today we have 6.2, 6.3, and a lot of that is debt because every time we have a deficit, we have to pay it, and we issue bonds. And the last bond he issued, Mr. Minister of Finance, a year before it was due, Mr. Minister of Finance, only 2% of the domestic market took it up, Mr. Minister of Finance, which means that the rest, the 98% who took it up, which were foreigners, they obviously are going to have to be paid in US dollars. And I don't know where is it coming from, but it's supposed to come off that foreign exchange that has been cut in half. So I can't see how you could say anything positive about I really find it's unfair, honest to goodness. I think Dr. Jagdev was wrong in what he said. I think it was being, there was a little bit of malice in that. I mean, sorry, Dr. Jagdev, but that's how it came across to me. I really did think that it was sort of crowing at Trinidad, and that doesn't help CARICOM. Right? It does not help CARICOM. But just tell me every year, you come out with a budget, and every time you have to tell me how volatile oil and gas is, because what that means, volatile means you're not sure what the price will be next year. So if you know that already, and you have put all your eggs into one little basket, essentially, which is the energy sector, and you know that long time, and you say it yourself when you deliver the budget every year, and yet you do nothing. Diversification. That's what the Prime Minister said, He was so annoyed. What people say that diversification. But okay, maybe he didn't want to hear the word. But what he really want to say is we need to find other streams of foreign exchange earnings. And since we only have 2.8 billion cubic feet of gas per day, even if the Dragon field comes on board, which don't hold one's breath, the Lauren is on the Venezuelan side, which is 70% of most of the natural gas. Anyhow, the man may or may not, because Shell has not made a final decision. They have to make it in March, right? So you have the manatee, the Lauren manatee. The good news, as I said, is Touchstone is good news. And the good news is with the unitization of the 3 trains, or 4 if you want to call it 4, but okay, let's pretend it's 4. Yeah. I pretend it's 4. We'll pretend it's 4, like the Minister of Energy did. We'll go into La La Land. But let us pretend it is. One of the good thing they did do is they said that they would allow access to third parties to provide them with the gas. And that, in my view, I am not in the ministry, but I suspect they must be talking about Touchstone. Because the deal, I think, my understanding is that 80% of the ownership of that by heritage, 20% is heritage and 80% is Touchstone. So if they have 381 billion cubic feet of gas on land, so they don't have to build any pipeline off land, and all the pipelines belong to NGC, undersea, oversea, and you're not crossing any borders, then that can help us out. But in the meantime, and even then, when it comes to being, why have we done this to ourselves? I want to ask you. You are the expert. Why you said we should have done this, but Dr. Ram, this is going too long. This is going on too long.
Yeah.
It is hard for me to accept it when I look at the foreign exchange reserve position that the governor has to tell us. When I have to look at our contraction in our growth, when I have to look at the debt to GDP that didn't go up, not because he did anything, but because we got more money. And we got more money because the price of oil and gas went up, nothing to do with us. Right?
Yeah.
I want to know what, as a government, and you say in the private sector, just one last thing I will say. So my experience when I was in government, and from what I was told, and from what I saw for myself and experienced for myself, the same way that we say we have a dependency syndrome among people in this country, whatever you want to call it, however it has arisen, the reality is that the private sector in this country are risk averse. They do not want to take chances. They want the government to take the chance and then blame the government or facilitate, or let us say have the government do their bidding because of the influence they can exercise on the government. But they really are not producers. They are retailers. Those who do business in this country, they could buy and they could sell. And we are spending, Dr. Hussain corrected me, because the last time I heard the food import bill was 5 billion, but he told me now it's 8 billion. Who's to blame for that? And Dr. Carl Theodore, who you must know very well, I know him very well too, he has a whole department at the university talking about the effect of health on the economy, right? And franchise upon franchise upon franchise upon franchise. dead end, no end jobs. Who is responsible for that?
Yeah. Well, Karen, one thing I want to say. Well, yeah. One thing I want to say about private sector and incentives. Well, I'm firmly in the private sector myself now, and I can tell you that it's like the number one law of physics. It is you have motion, and things move where there's the least resistance. What I would want to say to you and the audience here is that the way how Trinidad and Tobago economy is set up, and anybody who wants to make a profit wherever you are in the world, you will attempt to make a profit based on the economic circumstances where you are and which is easiest for you to do. The way how the Trinidad and Tobago economy is set up, it means that it incentivizes the type of economic activity that we have there from the private sector, which leads to us saying that they are risk averse. What I think we need to do, and this is what I constantly have been saying since I was at the Caribbean Development Bank, is that we have to take the hard decisions to reorient our economies away from this economic structure that we have come to depend on, which is really government-led economic growth. And so what happens, even in government, the incentive is for government to try to maximize its current revenues, its immediate revenues. Hence the reason why we use our limited resources of natural gas in the least value-added activity, because it goes into LNG, which generates rents and revenues for the government now, but it is not the best use of that gas for the overall economy. And this
Why
is
do
what
you say that? For me, I didn't know that, but tell me why.
yes,
Tell us why.
let me tell you, I'm not sure if you're aware, but maybe when I did my master's degree, I did it on LNG in Trinidad and Tobago. And when I did it, LNG is the lowest value added activity you can use for your natural gas.
Why
It
is that?
it is like taking your cocoa and just selling the cocoa beans abroad, and everyone else then using your cocoa beans to make chocolate abroad and then selling it back to you. If you think about it, we are actually selling our natural gas in the rawest form
Right.
to someone else,
I
who
understand.
then at the time, wherever that gas might be, they then liquefy that gas again and
Yeah.
use it to generate electricity, and then they add value
I
onto it.
see.
And so this is why I keep saying, and this
Mhm.
is why I know it is controversial.
Mm.
And I will say it again. And I know it is difficult, but I'm making the point here
You're
for the
making a good point, a real good point.
the point here is you shut down an LNG plant and you use that natural gas at home to generate higher value added, and in terms generate more
I
GDP
understand.
growth, as it were. I know it is difficult, and I know it's practically impossible. But the point is, I'm trying to say that you have to start using what you have and using it in a way that generates more value added.
Mhm.
And but this can only happen
Mhm.
if we also change the whole dynamic. Because what happens at government, because
Mhm.
if you think about it, the current prime minister, minister of finance, they need to generate revenue so that they can spend, because as a type of political economy we have, they need revenue so that they can do whatever they can to gain votes at the next election. Need to change that completely. And so that is why you would find that instead of trying to diversify the economy, and perhaps someone saying diversify, 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 and mocking that statement, they are only focused on trying to get more gas, because the gas will actually then feed the current type of political economy that we have.
That
And
is such an excellent point that I had never. I mean, I don't know our listeners probably appreciated that a long time ago.
mm,
And I guess I was there at the beginning of LNG when we were supplying 80% of America's LNG for their buses and things. I'm kind of proud of that. But I do understand the analogy you have made, and you're 100%. I do understand what the point you have made, and it is really a very, very, very valuable.
Yeah.
But is it
No,
equal, though?
no. Let me say, Karen, I'm not here to say, well, our past leaders made wrong decisions. They did what they thought was right, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but let us now learn from those mistakes and know that we have a really depleting resource, and how best we want to use that resource for our own economic growth, our generation of jobs at home. And when I say jobs, I mean real productive jobs. I'm not talking about a government job that might not be as productive. I'm not saying that all government jobs are
I
not productive,
understand.
but
Mhm,
quite a few can be. But we
mhm.
need to now channel those resources into areas where we can have greater productivity and therefore generate much higher levels of economic growth. That
You,
has to be the focus right now.
you mean, when you said that, it reminded me that I had read that one of the reasons, everybody speculates, because if you read Bloomberg, you read this one, like, if you read, I get so confused, because people have their agenda, and the
Yeah.
media, and like everybody, and that's the reality, whether you like it or not, that is reality, right? So one of the articles that I had read, um, when they said that Biden, which I don't think that's going to happen now with Mr. Maduro. I mean, Maduro, Maduro is Maduro. Let me just put it that Maduro is from Maduro, okay? But what one of the articles had said is that one of the reasons why President Biden has sort of eased up on his position with the allowing us to um, buy the natural gas from Venezuela in cash, not just in kind, was because he felt that there was a benefit to United States because of the Point Lisa's industrial estate, which has methanol, urea, ammonia, and a lot of the products which you are talking about, the value-added products that he would want to also America to benefit from.
Mhm.
So I guess what you really are saying is diversify into the economy into the energy economy where you can get the best bang for your buck. And the LNG, while it may have served its purpose at the time, and it did serve a purpose at the time, that
Mhm.
has long passed.
Yeah.
And but the difficulty I think now is that that's the way the world is. I mean, I'm not holding anything against Shell or no PPTT. They're in the business, they have shareholders, and they want the greatest return. And there's also this thing, transfer pricing. That's another thing that they've been talking about. The minister, every time he did his budget, he would talk about this transfer pricing, where they would go to the which you can explain it better than I can. But if you're a big multinational corporation, you have other subsidiaries, you would price it in such a way that whichever subsidiary you sent it to, it would be something like a tax haven for you. So you're paying the lowest a tax to us in Trinidad, but
Yes.
getting the highest return because
Yeah.
you're taking that gas that you send to that subsidiary and doing what you just said,
Yes.
taking those our
Yeah.
chocolate or cocoa
Yeah.
and
Coco.
make it, but not Cadbury not even high end, eh? You have to go red high end, right? You have to go red,
Yeah.
you have to go Swiss, you have to go Sweden or Switzerland, right? That's the
Exactly.
chocolate. But I know the point you're making.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And
but we also have to be realistic, you
mm,
know, because we have allowed ourselves, for whatever reason, to reach the point that we have reached.
yes.
So that makes me turn to ask you then, before I go to productivity, because I really want to talk a little bit about that.
Hmm.
Uh, your views, you've explained well about the LNG, and you have made a good point. Whether we are able to do anything, given that we are not the controller of this new unitized commercial entity, in which we have 11% share or something like that in total. I think we had in 2 and 3 we had nothing. In
Yes.
4 we had 11.1%, and
Yes.
in 1 we had 10%, but nobody's in 1 except our Minister of Energy.
Yes.
But okay, all joking aside, though, I had David Abdullah on. I think he was pretty I think he was, being very thoughtful in his comments on what he said.
Mhm.
The closure of the refinery, um, was that a good thing? No, I'm going to ask you that because, of course, the closure of the refinery, which I didn't even know before until David McIntyre, Daddy Mac, who is from La Brea,
Yes.
educated me. Yes, Daddy Mac educated me. He had to give me a lesson of air. Of air for me to really understand it. But bottom line, I couldn't understand this thing with the bitumen at all. I could not understand this issue with the bitumen. But the bottom line, he said the last or the Dr. Daddy Mac, you're listening quietly. Just say what it is they took from Petrotrin and then sent to Lake Asphalt to make the bitumen. Just explain it simply, if you don't mind.
Well, in the refining of the raw crude, the bottom product, the last product that will stay, or what you will draw down on, is what we call flux oil or bunker C oil, right? Bunker C oil is the last product. We have bunker C, then we have heavy diesel, then we have light diesel, then kerosene, and up the road we go, gasoline and stuff. But the bunker is what they use to re-refine. In other words, they will pass it through the refinery again for another refining process, which will further take away or take out of that bunker C whatever moisture that might be there, whatever what should I say, contaminants that will be there, and bring it to what they call flux oil. It's a highly flammable oil. It can uh, ignite if too much wind is blowing and all of that. Now that flux oil is what they mix with the asphalt. Asphalt, not the raw asphalt, but at the asphalt company, they would refine what they mined on the raw material. They will refine it or pass it through a still. That it just brings it to a sort of different kind of stage. It will be still considered raw to the people who import it or who use it for the production of other downstream products and stuff. But the mixing of the flux oil with the asphalt in that stage, in its molten stage, they will store it and use and manufacture the bitumen. Yeah,
I know,
and
Dr. Ram, you know that. We said it for the audience. Huh?
yeah,
So I know it was said for the benefit. And thank you, Daddy Mark. Daddy
Yeah.
Mark, you did a good teaching job there.
Yeah.
That was very good.
I was
I
actually
look
Very,
at
very simple. You
I
had to
look,
be real hard. You had to be real hard if you didn't understand what you said there.
yeah, I used to work at the refinery, so I
I know you
know.
were very binary, but listen, I just want to say I taught at the law school for many years. And one thing they finally realized, being a teacher and being a lecturer and being a lawyer, they're different skill sets. So what you just showed is your skill set as a communicator also.
Yeah.
And I knew that Dr. Ram, who is an energy expert, knew everything that you just said. We said it for the benefit of the listening audience. So what I was really trying to ask you, and I'll give you the floor again, the closer refinery, when I had David Abdullah on, he said 7,000. And I questioned that because I don't want to be one of those people that, want to, be sensationalized and stuff and be mislead people. He broke it down for me. 3,500 were full time, 1,500, he said, they were not full time, but they were employed every day, daily paid. So they effectively they were full time. So that's 5,000. And then he accounted for the 7,000. He
right.
accounted for me for the 7,000. So that is 7,000 people. And well, of course, Marabella was students at Ghost Town and all the businesses. Just as how they tell you when you bring a business in the town, how the town comes alive and the bank, restaurants. So, well, the opposite happened to with the closure of Petrotrin. And then Lake Asphalt too. Lake Asphalt is, I always call it a ward of the state. They're just keeping it alive on oxygen. I don't know what quality of oxygen they're using. And meanwhile, we are navigating potholes in this country. So I want your opinion. And one last thing I would say before you answer, to be fair to you, based on what he said. I'm not saying you don't know it, but just to be fair in the discussion. When we were talking about the Tran-Tobago Petroleum Holding Limited company that was formed, and they talk about the Guaracara refinery, Paria, which would do the bringing in the fuel, the trading aspect, and heritage exploration and development. He said he was part of the committee. He said it on this air, part of the committee that sat down, and 2 weeks before the announcement that they were closing down the refinery, they had divided it up into two companies. One doing exploration and production, and the other doing the marketing and so on. And 2 weeks before, and he also said, and it is quoted, I went and looked it up myself. I looked it up, I read it myself. He did say that as the Minister of Finance, when they said they had a first priority lien on the assets, that is the lender, the bond holder, Trafalgar or whatever the name is, I can't remember the name for me now. Right? They had a first priority lien on the assets of Heritage and Guaracara. So in other words, if Guaracara went under, so would Paria. And apparently that first priority lien had a lot to do with and you know what they have said, and it is true. It is true, because I did go back to the minister's statement before Parliament, and even after Parliament, saying what they were going to do. Oh, you'll have the I think it was 700 million, yeah, but don't worry, you don't have to start up 500 million to start up. Don't worry, we will give you 3 years grace period, and after the 3-year grace period, we'll give you 11 years and all kinds of, it's a sweetheart deal. So, we're going to let you start this darn thing, got that ball going. And they had the Prime Minister go down in Palo Seco Primary School about 2 weeks before election. Yes, I read it, because I make sure I check my information. I want to make sure, right? 2 weeks before Palo Seco Primary School, he said, where's Guaracara? Where's they're not the what you call Patriots, the owners of Guaracara refinery? Where are they? We ready to sign on the dotted line? At which point in time he had to have known how does this first priority lien, which as a result of which, and the third point was that our Minister of Finance did say on November whatever, he did say, the priority lien, we could take that lien and we could only bond. The issue was the bond, that the bond was becoming due. The big one from what's that Prime Minister's good friend? I'm sorry, I don't mean to say it that way, but he was his good friend, Malcolm Jones, with the WGTL thing, right? Yeah. That bond was becoming due in very soon, a year late, or 2019 or something like that. Anyway, he said that bond, we could put that bond, we could put on another asset. So that doesn't have to stop us going forward. So yeah, he did say that. He said that. When he was asked about it, he did say that November 3rd. I do have it right in front of me. But when he was asked, maybe he said it off the cuff, maybe he did, but he said we could put it somewhere else. So that will stop it. So that's why David Abdullah came on the show and said he felt that the government was dishonest with them if they themselves knew that they could have taken that bond, and that they had always paid all their taxes and all that. True, things weren't going the best. Right. But the other thing he did say, which a lot of people may not know, yes, it's a refinery. That doesn't mean it has to have all the oil. It means it has to be able to refine oil. And they were refining 164,000 barrels of oil per day. Only 57,000 from Trinidad. But we were refining the oil. So because oil wasn't coming from Trinidad, didn't mean the refinery could not operate. So I said all of that to give you the stage now to say all that you want to say about whether or not you should have closed it or not closed it or whatever. Your point on that, your view was on that.
Well, I have to admit, when the government took the decision to close the refinery, I understood exactly why they were doing it. Well, at least I thought I did. Because I thought it was going to be a case where they understood, just as David Abdullah explained there, that you had too many people working at the oil company at the time, And so it would have given the new company, because I thought it was a case of you close, you do your restructuring, and then you immediately restart. And I thought, okay, I understood that. This is probably the easiest thing to do in order to get you to a place where you could run your refinery efficiently. That refinery probably didn't need more than 1,000 to 1,500 people to run. 7,000 was ridiculous. So I understood that. What my disappointment has come in that is not what really transpired. It was really a shutdown of the refinery, and there was then no plan to really meaningfully reopen it. Whatever happened between RWTU and that bond, and so I think there should have been a priority of the government of Trinidad and Tobago to ensure that refinery would not stay shut down, that it would be restarted as soon as possible. In fact, Karen, the ideal thing is that it should not have been shut down at all, and you should have taken the hard decisions, whatever those decisions were, to bring down that head count to about 1,000 to 1,500 people. Take the hard decisions, whatever fiscal hit we needed to take at the time. Let's do that, and let's keep this thing going. And the refinery would have been making money much more for us, and I think eventually we would have paid off that debt, with respect to the severance payments, and so we would have paid that off very, very easily. So I would say that very, very disappointed that what transpired and what has continued to transpire. You look at the refinery in Curacao, for example, where we all know that if I'm not mistaken, it probably has already been restarted through investment. So there is a desire by international players for refining capacity in and around this part of the world, and we have really missed a really strategic opportunity with that refinery. And Karen, I am from Marabella. I'm from Marabella, so I know, and my dad actually worked. He was a cartographer at the refinery. And
what's a cartographer? Is that drawing maps?
Yeah, just
don't want to use them big words that we don't know, huh?
Yeah. Well, and I will just let you on to a little secret that I always knew. My dad always told me. He said, Justin, you don't know how much oil Guyana have. It have a lot, and that was over 3 decades ago. So
Okay.
we always knew they had a lot of oil. But the point being that in Marabella, when the shutdown of that refinery meant a great, great loss. These periphery communities lost out a lot. And so I have to really wonder what sort of thinking goes into making these decisions where we don't look at all of these other negative impacts, because there's a lot of income, there's a lot of ancillary services that were dependent on that refinery. And I think Trinidad and Tobago is paying a huge price for that. And I agree with you. We don't need to be producing the oil in Trinidad and Tobago to refine it. The refinery in Curacao, there's never any oil produced in Curacao, but yet they always refine the oil there.
And Jamaica too.
And Jamaica as well. And that is what we have always done. And so we have really missed an opportunity. And I really wonder if too much time has passed for us to restart that refinery. And sometimes I wonder if there was some other motivation for why we actually shut down that refinery. But just to summarize, I did not agree with what was done over the long term with the refinery. I thought at the time, okay, we're going to shut it down for a day, do the severance, and then restart it immediately. Just like what we did with BWIA and CAL. Yeah, you make that change so that you can then have a restructuring that is smooth. But then you do not just shut it down. You know that this is a strategic asset that needed to be maintained. But we are where we are, and I think it's very, very unfortunate. I really do hope that refinery can still be restarted.
Let me ask you then, before I say what he said, before I go to the reason I was given, and I think there's value in what he said, because sometimes I don't like conspiracy theorists. I'm always wary of them, because I always think well, you have your agenda, and I maybe I'm too pragmatic. But let me ask you, I understand from another person who worked in your, you probably know it better than I, There are 27 plants in all. Some of them are 100 years old. So that one of the things they did in 2016 when they had a joint select committee, some of the recommendations were they should have a aging what's the word for it? So that you'd build up God, the word is escaping me. You'd actually be able to tell the age of each plant, and you
Okay.
keep that record, an aging
Like
record.
like
Right? That was one thing.
register. Yeah. Mhm.
Right, that was one thing. Another thing they said was that when oil prices are low, try to put together contracts for 5 and 10 years so that when the price of oil goes up, the refinery will make more money because it's paying less for the oil, but it's making more at the end of the day over the 5-10 year period. That was one of the other suggestions. And clearly, obviously, it was overstaffed. I don't think anybody would argue and that was the case. And I think what David Abdullah said, I don't want to say he said it directly, so let me be careful in how I say it. But I think he did say it though. I think I think there's some truth in it. It was seen as a way of breaking the back of the most powerful union in the country, OWTU, which was the most powerful. I don't know what it is now. It certainly was at that time. And because why, I'm going to ask you, because we are on the same page. But you know what I do not understand. I'm going to give you the example of Dubai just as an example, because I use it because I am politically involved, but I don't bring that on this show. But I did use it as an example because doing my research. If I'm going to do that and make that decision, am I not going to make sure that I have something else to replace it? I mean, am I going to not make sure that I put something in place so that the country does not suffer, the workers don't suffer? And as you said, it's not just the people because the energy sector does not really employ many people. At the construction stage, yes. But when it comes to the actual, because it's really an expert, it's not labor intensive, right?
Yes.
So, but won't you have something else already put in place before you shut it down, right? And I use the example actually of Dubai because I didn't go into detail, which I'm not going to do because I read the story of the Sheikh can't remember the correct name, and I don't want to get in trouble mispronouncing his name. Yeah. But he, Dubai was in a serious, it's a port. And I went to Dubai twice when I was in government, and I was given as a gift one of the ships the wooden ships they would use to do their pearl diving.
Right.
And they had pearl diving season. And it was a very dangerous thing. And you'd have to go to the great depths, and many people did not survive. But that was not even the issue. In the early 1920s, Japan discovered the cultured pearl. And I think another country discovered the cultured pearl. And there went the pearl industry. It collapsed. And the people were literally starving to death. Literally, because this country was a country of sand. In 1969, according to they discovered under that sand was oil. Now, he could have done what our government has done, appear to have done, and say, well, take care of this generation, take care of the next generation. Third generation, the fourth generation, we ain't going to be around, so you have to take care of yourself. He could have done that. But in 1969, you know what is a quotation they said of him? Because that we know we have the Dubai International Financial Center. Now they have gone into expanding into fintech hub. They have a big tourism sector. They're doing extraordinarily well, right? And they said it was a herd mentality. They got AIG to come. And once they got one of the big boys to come, they see, but they had to have something in this. But it also to the whole structure and system. So we studied it. But this is what he said. He said when they discovered oil in 1969 under all that sand, that poor country, he said, my father rode a camel. I drive a Mercedes-Benz.
Right.
His son drives a Range Rover. His son will drive a Range Rover. But what he says is if he didn't do something, his son's son will be riding a camel. And I can understand. Singapore Oh, I can't for the life of me, I cannot understand. This is what I cannot understand. The decision, I think, was a terrible decision. But having made such a terrible decision, would you not have already said, but people have no fear. This is what we are. We have begun and we have this, and we will have a period of trial. Something.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I'm asking you for some kind of explanation. I think I'm going to run out of my phone. My thing is going to die just now. So if you don't mind, I'm moving my connection to where so
Okay.
that I'll go thing. But you can go ahead because the listeners
Yeah.
to you.
Well, I think it says it is a much bigger discussion that we have to have in Trinidad and Tobago, and in terms of, I work across the Caribbean as well, whereby we now have a governance framework that is not fit for purpose, meaning specifically that it incentivizes a short-termism, which means that it is really in the interest of governments to sometimes do things without any regard for the people, as long as they are okay in the short term, meaning the government. So I have been making this point, Karen, I would say for the last 3 years, that we need a new social contract, a social contract based on our new reality. So we have constitutions that we developed right after independence, generally drawn from the Canadian and perhaps British experiences. And that's what we had at the time. But we now have 62 plus years of knowledge as to what our people require. And that is for Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. Other Caribbean countries probably a little bit less because they gained independence after us. But we now know that this governance framework does not work for us. Why do I say that? Because it incentivizes these types of terrible decision making, which are not long term in nature. If you think about it, Karen, you spoke about Dubai and you spoke about Singapore. Dubai is not a democracy, yes? And so they have this sort of they can think long term, yes? They can think long term. It's really, really important.
I agree with you.
Singapore, as you know, they had
Same difference.
they had a benevolent, I would say, dictator
Dictatorship.
for a long time.
I agree with you.
We of course don't want to have dictators, but we need to have a system in place which says, look, as a government, you need to adhere to some long-term planning, things that will generate overall benefits for the people, and we need to have some mechanism that judges your short-term decision making against that long-term metric. I don't know what that is, but I think that's a type of social contract discussion that we need to have, because otherwise we're going to continuously have this problem that we've seen popping up and again. And we see it in so many other areas of governance in Trinidad and Tobago. Sometimes I am amazed at the amount of money that sometimes is wasted. The decision to close down a refinery and you had nothing in place, that for me can never happen if we had a different type of social contract in place whereby a government knew that their decisions had to be judged against what was right for the people, and not only for the current generation, for future generations. This is something that we fail to take account of. We don't think about future generations at all. But that's not happening in Dubai. That's not happening in Singapore. And we know it's not happening in China because they're thinking in 100-year life terms. We need to find some way to bring that into our governance framework. And that is the discussion that I think we need to have now.
I think what you said there, I have also recognized that. And in fact, when I did mention the Dubai thing, I did see in an article I had written a few years back, I did say that one of the reasons why I think Police was able to come to fruition was that we had one government for about 20 years. So you could do that type of planning. We didn't have a benevolent dictatorship. We didn't have what other countries had at that time, but we had a party that people felt that could not be removed, as a consequence of which the foreign direct investors and the whole shebang We
Yeah,
could
that's
do it.
ability.
Don't have to be fighting an election like how they have to do now. Trinidad and fortune and fortune, what makes us strong also makes us weak. And exactly what you are saying is the advantage. Sometimes we do not pay enough attention to that when we use Malaysia and Dubai example, which I will still use, we have to be cognizant of the fact that, hey, you know what, they could do that, because not a dog bark. And so they're better than a dog bark. So they can do that, but it is benevolent. And they are, and so we have to then look at ourselves and see if we are our own worst enemies. Are we going to fight each other so much?
Yeah.
And our children will suffer. And then the government has to take a lot of responsibility for accommodating that way of thinking. But I think we're on the same page with how could you close it down? Now, that turns me now. I was going to ask about evaluation. I really wanted to hear views on that, and we run out of time, but because I was going to the productivity point.
Yes.
And let you do the evaluation. I want you to do the evaluation. And if I get chance, I will say what I wanted to say about productivity. I do not understand, and you can explain the difference between balance of trade, current account, the difference between your current account, your balance of trade, and why the IMF, as up to recently as this year, I believe, said that our currency, we said so long, is overvalued by at least 20% because our imports are greater than, I didn't say value, say your imports are greater than our exports, and the balance of trade is not the same thing. So I want you, please, to explain to us why is it that Barbados can have an exchange rate of 2-to-1 to the US dollar. I lived in Barbados for 4 years, and
Right.
they used to say you can do anything in Barbados, but the one thing you cannot do is change that currency rate. That's sacrilegious.
Right.
So I would like you to explain, especially having been in Caribbean Development Bank, similarly for the Eastern Caribbean, why is their money worth more than our money when apparently we are, according to GDP and nominal and real GDP and all the per capita GDP, whatever you want to use, we're supposed to be a high income economy. So please explain to us.
Yes. Well, let me start with that last point. So I think, of course, when you see Barbados at 2-to-1 and then the Eastern Caribbean at 2.7, if I'm not mistaken, EC dollars to $1 US, we automatically think, well, all right, that their currency is worth more than ours. But I want to make this point to the listeners that there's something called purchasing power parity. So you might have a local currency, okay, and when you have to go to the bank to change that into US dollar, you are converting less of that than a Trinidad and Tobago person might have to do in order to get the same US dollar. That is fine. But let me say something to you. If you were to spend that $1 US in Barbados, in, let's say, in Antigua, which is a member of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, and you spend that $1 in Trinidad and Tobago, do you know where you're going to get more for your US dollar? You're going to get, in Trinidad and Tobago, you will get more for your $1 US. So I want to make that point clear to people that we have to be mindful of when we say your dollar is stronger here and there. What can you really buy for it in your
purchasing power is the critical thing.
The purchasing powers, and that's why I always say to other economists, when you make a comparison across economies, real GDP is not the real measure to use. You have to use purchasing power, and you convert your GDP to that. And when you actually do that, the Chinese economy is the biggest in the world. I just want to make that point to you, because
so explain the purchasing power again, because I think that is the missing link. When you tell people how they, and of course, good for Barbados, and good for our Eastern Caribbean brothers and sisters. We're glad for them, but we just want to understand the key there. So explain that purchasing power one more time.
So in a pure simple manner, it might seem to you that those currencies are stronger. But when you have to use the actual global currency, which for us is the US dollar, and you take that US dollar and you go to buy something in Barbados. And the last time I looked at this, for example, let me explain this. If you take $1 US and you go to the United States to buy $1 US worth of goods, you will get $1 US worth of goods, right? Because that is the currency of that country.
Although we know in America, anyhow, that's another story.
Yeah,
They print a lot of money.
Yeah, that is on average across
Yeah,
the
I
United
understand.
States.
Okay, all right.
Now, if I take $1 United States and I go to Barbados, I'm only going to get 80 US cents worth of goods. Okay, understand that? 80 US cents worth of goods. In Trinidad and Tobago, however, when I last looked at this, it was a few years ago, so the numbers have changed. You would actually get $1 and maybe close to 30 US cents worth of goods.
I got you.
So you're even getting more than what you would get in the US, because sometimes we produce some things locally a lot cheaper than what you can keep, right? In the Eastern Caribbean, I would say maybe might be about, you would get 85 US cents or so. In Guyana, when I last looked at this, you would get $1.60 US cents when you spend that $1 US compared to the United States. In Jamaica, at the time, it was about $1.47. So that purchasing power parity tells you really what you need to know in order to make comparisons. So that, for example, when somebody says to me, well, this person is making 10,000 US per annum in Jamaica, and that person is making 10,000 US per annum in Barbados, I can tell you that the person in Jamaica is a lot better off. Because
how about in Trinidad? They make it 10,000 US. I want that job. Find me that job.
Exactly.
I understand what you're saying. So I hope people understand then
that
you just can't just look at the exchange rate, but you have to look at the purchasing power of that dollar.
So,
and that is true, you know, because I have gone to of course, we are Caribbean people, and I have family and in-laws and family members from other Caribbean islands. And when you go there, your US dollar does not go very far. I mean, it's cheaper to go to the States on holiday and stay in a hotel in the States. My Caribbean brothers and sisters. Really, it's true though.
Right.
You know, it's an expensive undertaking to go on vacation in the Caribbean.
Yes.
And that is it, putting it simply, because that 100 US I have, when I go up to America, I will get 100 US worth of goods, things like that. That 100 US I have, and I go to another island in the Caribbean, and going to give me $100 worth. So that explains why it is that their money may look as though it's stronger than ours. How could their money seem to be stronger than ours against the US dollar? Because its purchasing power is not equivalent.
It's not as strong.
Well, look at that. You're a good teacher, Dr. Ram.
Right. So let me just come back to the whole point around the
valuation.
This is a topic that I've studied at great length. And, you know, at first I thought, okay, it was a good idea for us to have a sort of a floating exchange rate, that made sense. But the more and more I have looked at, because we are small open economies, I think that the best mechanism for us is either one, what they use in the Eastern Caribbean, which is what you call a currency board. And so you have, for example, any amount of US EC dollars in circulation are fully backed by hard currency. So if, for example, your reserves are going down, your domestic money supply must also go down, right? Now,
what does that mean? How does that? Okay, so what's the benefit of that then?
All right, so the benefit of that is that
David, do you think you're in a class? And our listeners, you think they're in a class? It's a good class.
It's a very good class.
Very good class. Because when the minister talking, we know what he's saying now.
Raj Paul is saying that Dr. Ram really knows what he is talking about. Close down the LNG plant now. And Joycelyn Lewis Dial Singh, I bought a lovely tap. I bought a lovely tap at Rattan's for $15 TT. And a ING size cotton quilt for $250 TT. Explain this, please. I laundered these items for good quality testing. It passed with flying colors.
Okay.
So, when you really think,
I don't think Dr. Ram it works in the division of what do you call that division where
yeah,
they deal with the quality control.
Right. All right.
But
That's the standard. That's the Bureau of Standards.
yeah, yeah, you understand. But what he really telling you, I think we all understood what he's saying, that you're
Right.
getting more bang for your buck
Yeah.
with the TT dollar, with the our TT conversion, when we go to the States or go elsewhere, than other countries that appear on the face of it to have a stronger currency to the US dollar. Because
and she's also saying that it passed with flying colors.
yeah,
She
what are you saying? Go ahead.
enjoyed 1948. I don't know what it meant.
Mm.
And she's also saying king. But what I wanted to ask Dr. Ram is that, okay, so we what should we do if we had to close down the LNG trains? Would it mean that the government or private sector in brackets, should put up these or set up new structures for re-refining the LNG for downstream projects?
Well, if I I can answer that quite easily. Well, we already know we have some higher value added activities in Point Lisas that we've mothballed because they don't have enough gas.
Right.
So for example, if I'm not mistaken, our iron plants, if there was a methanol plant that was mothballed, so we have some plants there that ironically produce more value added for us. But we have taken decision to not give them gas and to give gas to LNG, simply because although it's lower value added, the government in the short term can get much more revenue because they're using a lot more gas, right? And because they're using a lot more gas, the way how our taxation is that we tend to tax a little bit more at the production stage that when the gas comes out of the well, and so we get a lot more. So there's an incentive to use as much gas now to get those short-term revenues, rather than saying let us use this gas in the highest value-added activity, which will eventually generate more jobs for people. And that's why I keep saying that we need to get away from the economic paradigm that says that we want to depend on government spending revenues and creating jobs in that way. That's not the way. That's not the way for a sustainable economy. You want people to have their own ability. It's sort of having their own self-resilience to go into the labor market and earn the income for themselves. And that's why I think we should be using the gas in much more higher value activities, which will generate much more sustainable jobs, not just short-term government types employment, which unfortunately for us has not been the greatest level of productivity. Coming back to the productivity question.
The same implies to the asphalt that we export. It's like the cocoa beans and what we talk about, that we sell them raw and we buy them at bigger prices in refined stages. Like the asphalt, when China and these places import, they import a lot. They have a lot of warehouses fully loaded, all in England. They're fully loaded with this raw. Even though it went through some refining by passing the raw thing through the still, but what we export, we could have developed industries for downstream products, because we buy the same asphalt products or the downstream products from China also, because battery cases for cars and a lot of stuff are being made with that asphalt mix, with plastics and all kind of things. We could have been doing that here.
Exactly.
Even know that.
Exactly. And when
That's
you
the first time David. That's the first time David said that. Those last two. I just first time I heard it. So a good thing about Johnny Show.
Yes, I like what he's saying. I understand what he's saying. If we don't change that concept of governance, it's about time we move away from governing for votes. I see it like that sometimes. They just do things to get votes, because a lot of mini projects would be popping up in these stronghold areas. I call them strangleholds, Labre, Lavantil. I don't call them strongholds. I call them strangleholds, because there are lots and lots of opportunities just laying on the side
But
without
they don't want them to have
any
that.
kind of implementation of ideas.
No, they
Or
don't want that. They don't
we
want
have the
that.
pitch league there that I'm
You want
fighting.
them to start thinking? You want them to start thinking and start to say, I could open up my own business? No,
Yeah,
no,
because
no, no, no,
we have
You
this
don't want that.
space
no. You don't
and
want that.
we have the land and everything where we can establish these industries for downstream products. I mean, I've been making a lot of noise, and just last Friday I went to a stakeholders meeting about the development of the Pitch Lake to make it the #1 tourist destination in the Caribbean. I'm not only talking Trinidad and Tobago. I always make the reference to them that in the same manner that people would leave here and go to Canada and go to Niagara Falls and these kind of big tourist destinations and come back here and they're like blown away. If you see Niagara Falls, boy, but I want people to leave Trinidad when they have gone through that pitch lake experience and go and tell people there's something in Trinidad that you must visit. You must have the experience
So
because
Walter Raleigh corked his ship with the tar from Pitch Lake.
there is so
Exactly.
much about the pitch
But
lake that I'm trying to get them to understand and to implement. I think I have to start talking with private sector people
Yeah,
if
but
I am to get anywhere.
before we lose Dr. Ram, because we only have 9 more minutes, I think, I
Yes.
just want to
Yes,
quickly,
go ahead.
like,
Go
I
ahead.
couldn't deal with the productivity thing because I really did want to, but I can't deal with it. And I'll just say one thing about it that I didn't know before. And it's strange, so I'll just say this. A lot of the thing they talk about labor force participation rate, and then they tell me unemployment rate is 3.7. And of course the real thing is, and then there's another figure that they use to this, which is as equally as important as the labor force participation rate. But I don't know how I got a Scott drug report copy. I don't know. It came up. I mean, I typed it and I was surprised I got it. But the point I'm going to make was in 1995, they were saying there was an economic cost to the cocaine trade and the crime in the country. He said because in other countries, they run 3 cycles in the factories. They can go 24/7. He said, but in Trinidad, if you have to do it, you have to pay huge private companies and private companies to provide you with the services, protection, services, protective services, private sector, or you have a lot of people, a lot of women who can't do that, work at night because it's not safe. As soon as dawn, night starts to fall, and right now is 6 o'clock, you don't want to be outside on the road. And a lot of times, they were saying that a lot of times the productivity level, our labor force participation rate, which is very low in Trinidad, 56%, at the last. And then you're telling me the unemployment rate is 3.7%. And they're telling me you are considered to be employed even if you get a few hours of work per week. That's 20,000 CPEP URP workers that in that 3.7%. That is 3.7% they count in. And then you deal with the crime where people are literally afraid to work at night because they're afraid of being held up. And so when we want to criticize our people for lack of productivity, we have to understand there's the issue of crime, health. Dr. Carl Theodore has done a lot of work on that. All these franchises, non-communicable diseases. I'm sure, Dr. Ram, you have done studies on that. Non-communicable diseases, the diabetes, the high blood pressure, all of those illnesses, and the number of franchises we are allowing in this country, which first of all eating up our foreign exchange, but affecting productivity because it does. And you saw with the NIS, with the minister saying that they had to pay out 6 billion in NIS payments, but they only collected 4 point something billion. So what I am saying, I guess, at the end of the day, is for those who sit down there and advocate for the Venezuelans to be here, the unregistered ones, right? When you know the drugs coming in from there, and when you know they're working and they're not paying NIS, and they in on my hospital and my CPAP and using my CDAP and my health services, and when we cannot go out to work at night, except you're working in certain industries, can work in factories, factor that and the health issues with all these franchises that you are allowing to pop up, giving licenses to operate in this country, right?
Let me interject here a little bit. I have a foreign call.
The productivity.
I have a foreign caller, Kyle. Let me see the person is still here. Good
Oh,
afternoon.
God, sorry, Dr. Ram.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello? Hello? Okay, seems like we lost the person. So you have
Yeah, Dr. Ram. You know,
Yeah.
I thought we have to talk about all of that.
Well, of course. I mean, this is why I sort of come back to that point that the type of economic activity that you see, including labor force participation, the underemployment of people, is a reflection of this whole type of framework that we have, which incentivizes these things. You know, I used to work for the mayor of London years ago, and one of the big things that we also looked at was the nighttime economy for a big city. And in Trinidad and Tobago, which is also a big Lyman culture, the nighttime economy is quite big, but that has been hit quite severely. I know so many friends in Trinidad who do not, as you say, after 6 p.m., that is it, they're home, they lock up, not going anywhere. There's a huge amount of economic activity that is lost as a result of that. And of course, that then leads to all sorts of other
The factories, people aren't going to work in the factory tonight.
exactly. So
But you have to give them huge amounts to be able to get them to come out at night to work.
So how can you expect productivity to grow when you have all these other negative things that people have to deal with? So, you know, it is all linked. I think we have to start looking at the economy, the society as a system, as a whole system, and understanding where we have problems and why this is now leading to this backward and then forward linkage when we have issues in the economy, in our governance as well. But ultimately, Karen, and of course, David, I think governance has to be the number one priority for us. We have to change that. That's a tough job. In fact, we probably need a government to come in who really will say, I don't really care to get reelected. I come in to do the hard work. That's the kind of strong leadership that we want now, and push you. And then at the same time, you can be reelected if you then communicate and educate the population as to why you're doing this. Because I think the majority of Trinidad and Tobagonians want to see a change. I want to see a positive change, not only for themselves, but for their children and their
children. You know how many educated people, including my own children. I know very few people whose children stay here. They send their children home. Away. And you know, Ireland was able to bring them back when it started the International Financial Center. By the way, I just want to mention, I'm sure you've heard about it, the Fiscal Responsibility Act. I think Bahamas is passing that legislation, and another jurisdiction, which is really to answer what you were talking about, having that social contract with people and keeping the government sort of in line in terms of not spending the debt to GDP, etc., so that we have a responsible government. But at the end of the day, it's really the social contract. And you know what? It's been broken. There's a lack of trust. There really is a lack of trust. And therefore, when Mia Motley talks, they listen to her. You know, but that's the truth. That's the truth. When Mia Motley talks, they listen to her because you know what? She has a relationship with her people that is based on trust and confidence. And in this country, it has been broken. And I don't know how we will fix it, but we have to fix it. And I'm going to let you have the last word, Dr. Ram. And thank you for coming on the show.
Yes. Well, let me just say a couple of things. You know, if I just take one point on currency. You know, in my experience, I think we do need to go back to sort of a fixed exchange rate that is very close to dollarization. And that, unfortunately, we can't explain now. But I would say the best solution for us is what they have in the Eastern Caribbean. It works well, it gives stability, but it also means that you have to have fiscal discipline. And I just want to remind people that I'm currently in Turks and Caicos. And years ago, we had helped them set up a sort of a sovereign wealth fund. And I just want to say to people, we have no income tax, we have no corporation tax here, but we run budget surpluses. Just think about that.
Yeah, oh, he's talking like he's from the Turks and Caicos now. Frame out next time you see me in the airport, frame out, huh?
Caribbean man, right?
Yeah, Caribbean man.
Right.
And
So,
remind you, who's saying
right.
we? Caribbean man. Huh?
Okay,
Who's saying
exactly.
Caribbean
But
man?
I just want to say
Alice, Alice.
to the audience,
Mhm.
one of the reasons for that is that we have strong fiscal laws here, right?
Yeah.
Which means that you can't
Yes,
just go
we.
with
You're talking about Turks and Caicos.
Turks and Caicos.
Yeah, you
Yes,
better get
yes,
it right, because you
yes.
keep saying we, and
Yeah,
it's not
right.
about
I mean in Turks and Caicos. But
Mr.
think about it.
Maranello.
No income tax, no corporation tax, running budget surpluses. But it
Yes.
also means that you can't go and spend wild because you
Yeah.
have laws and rules in place. And
Yeah.
if you want to borrow, then you have to find more revenue to pay
Yes.
back that debt. You can't just go and borrow. But so the point making here is that if we want to have the type of progress,
Yes.
we have to take the hard decisions and
Yeah.
put things in place for our context so that we can have a good fraud governance framework and do what is right for our people, our children, and our grandchildren.
And you meant by that we, Trinidad. And we have to say goodbye now and to
Mhm.
wish everyone the best for the Christmas season. I don't think we have much till next week.
Yeah.
And see you in the next year. And Dr. Ram, it was a real pleasure having you on. And I would love to have you on again, because I don't think I did enough of a deep dive into the productivity and the valuation. You did such a good job in telling us how our purchasing power parity, CPPP, I got it right. And
Right.
good explanation. So now I can explain, anybody come and tell me, and people know that it is so. And at the end of the day, you remember that you're from here because you said we and ours. So welcome home from the Turks and Caicos,
Yes.
and have a wonderful Christmas. And to everyone who's listening this afternoon, have a wonderful and blessed Christmas. And of course, to my favorite person, David McIntyre, with whose help and support, I don't know if I could come on a Monday and do the job that we do. And to you, the people of everywhere, have a blessed Christmas.
Yes, I want to wish you all the best
you.
too, Dr.
Thank
Ram.
you. Thank you for having me.
I have your number, so when I need a little advice, I can't pay for that, but I will connect.
Anytime.
Okay.
Okay.
Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good Christmas.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
you too.
Okay.
That's it for today's edition of Hard Talk, Power 102 Digital Monday with Karen Nunez Tesheira and our very special guest, Dr. Justin Ram.